The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shayn, and today for you guys, I have a podcaster who's taken it upon himself to create a comfortable place for people to share their experiences with the infamously elusive beast we refer to as Sasquatch. You could almost say he's congregated a Bigfoot society. But before we get into this one today, we of course have to do the quick news and updates. The next event that I will be vending at is the Snarly Yow presents Cryptid Halloween 3. It's going to be happening in Ranson, West Virginia at the Ranson Civic Center. It is free admission. There's going to be vendors, speakers, podcasters, and the Scream actress Nancy Ann Ritter. And actually for this one, Orin and I are going to be speaking and emceeing for it. There's going to be a couple of other great speakers, at least 4 of them that I know of so far. And from what I heard from Snarly Yow, there may also be a haunted house at this one. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully I get to see you guys out there. And if anybody wants more information on that, there is more information down in the show description. And just a quick message, this podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. If you guys are interested in sharing an encounter, you guys can email me at ommencounterreports@outlook.com. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show, you guys can email me at increaseofrealitypodcast@outlook.com. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available on the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, Jeremiah Byron from Bigfoot Society. How's it going today, man?
Shayn, it's so good to be on your show. It's like we just talked on my show a few days ago. It's so weird.
It's funny how those things happen with podcasts.
It is, man. It's fun hanging out with you. So,
well, man, like I kind of mentioned on your show, I'm glad that we finally came around to this because it was one of those things where we both been in the community for you longer than me, but me around for like 3 years or so. And we kind of floated around each other a little bit. We talked for like a couple seconds here and there at like different conventions, but Small Town Monster Fest 2, we actually connected and made all this stuff happen. So I'm glad that it finally happened after a couple of years, man. It was bound to happen at some point, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just, it's fate. It's going to happen. So dude, it was fun chatting with you out there in Canton, but better to sit down and talk about some fun stuff. So.
Oh, yeah. So for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do, what your podcast is exactly, why don't you let them know a little bit about your background and a little bit about your show?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jeremiah from Bigfoot Society. I talk to people about their Bigfoot encounters. I started my podcast in February of 2019. I was involved with the filming of some interviews for Small Town Monsters documentary. My buddy was filming some interviews for Terror in the Skies doc. And he was like, hey, can you be the guy who interviews people off camera and gets them to say things for the documentary that I can film? And halfway through that experience, I was like, man, I really love this. This is great. I'd never interviewed anyone before, but I fell in love with it immediately on the spot. And I was like, man, I'm just going to start my own podcast and try to be cool like Shayn and LeGros and Ryan Sprague and all those guys. And at first I was just talking to people about cryptid stuff and cryptozoology. And then about a year and a half ago, I randomly was interviewing a guy about his Bigfoot encounter. I was like, man, this just feels like really special. And the people I would talk to afterwards, they're like, man, thank you for letting me just share what I've experienced. And I feel like it's off my chest now and I can go to sleep now at night. And I haven't been able to share this for 30 years. And I was like, man, this is really special. And I need to take this seriously. And it's been that for the last at least year and a half, maybe two. I talk to people all the time about their Bigfoot encounters, and someone at the beginning was like, man, you're going to run out of people to talk to. It's never going to happen, dude. It's at the point where I get like 10 solid emails a day, new contacts just reaching out, being like, dude, I've never talked to anyone. Can we talk? And I take that very seriously. So it's really turned into a pretty awesome experience, and it's also turned into a thing where I'm going out to different areas and looking for Bigfoot now, kind of on the side, and we can talk about that later too. But it's just a wild and crazy trip, man.
Dude, props to you for being that shoulder for people to rest on and actually be able to talk about this stuff. Because, I mean, obviously with my show, I have a lot of people come on and talk about these like really harsh experiences and stuff they've been through. Not necessarily always Bigfoot, but some people have just been through like really traumatic events with like, you know, MK Ultra, different things like that. But it's funny. It's like I have a lot of these type of guests on that have written books and done all of this stuff. So it seems that I have an issue sometimes with having just like normal people come on the show and actually talk about their experiences and stuff. So it's like props to you that you're able to set that up where you have this area where people are comfortable to just be normal, everyday, average people to just come on and actually talk about their experiences, because that's almost harder to do when you have somebody that comes on and they already kind of know the idea of like how an interview goes. It's like they kind of pop on and they just kind of flow and do their own thing. But when you have people coming on that just have never been on a podcast, never shared their experiences before, it's kind of like you have to coast it out of them, make them feel comfortable. It's just this totally different level of just trying to make people feel this warm, comfortable feeling so that they're able to actually get into the in-depth parts of their experience and not feel like they're, you know, under the microscope as they're on a microphone talking to somebody on a podcast. But honestly, man, some of those shows like that, though, it connects the dots for a lot of people and makes it so that somebody who completely felt like they were crazy because they had this weird experience, they listen to this one podcast and somebody brings up something very similar to it, and it just opens the door for all of these people to actually share their experiences. And in turn, too, it ends up helping all the researchers, too, because then you actually have people coming out and actually sharing all of these experiences instead of keeping them to themselves and not really knowing who to talk to about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your listeners have ever heard like old radio shows, like Art Bell would talk to people on the phone, it's kind of got a similar vibe, because usually I'm talking to older individuals that had like an experience back in the 70s. And so sometimes they don't have the internet. So I'm just like pretty much calling them up on the phone, and it's like that old school, like very low quality phone interview, but like it's very special and I love it. And there's something about like getting an old timer on the phone from like way out and in the woods in Oregon, and him just like sharing for like a solid hour, just like everything that's happened for like sometimes the last 40, 50 years. And it'll just blow your mind, the stuff that's out there that people don't realize.
Dude, Ronald Roseman, the one that we both had on our show, man, he's one of those ones. He's just a can of worms. It's like I had him to come on and talk about his Bigfoot experiences, but once he got going, man, he had a whole plethora of other experiences. So sometimes, again, it's like that doorway, and it seems like Sasquatch seems to be the one that people are the most comfortable talking with about at first. It's either Sasquatch or ghosts, and then in turn, once they get rolling, they start talking about all this other stuff that they normally wouldn't even tell anybody about, like the UFO stuff, man. It's like, even if you've seen a UFO, that seems to be one of those ones that people just avoid telling the average person, even though the average person nowadays, I feel that's the most believable thing to them, even though they want to scrutinize anybody that brings it up. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ronnie Roseman is such a good example. And like, I got to go out to Oak Ridge, Oregon, which is where he's from, that area in the Willamette National Forest. But dude, like they took me out in the woods, like miles and miles and miles out on the service road to the meadow where they had their encounter. And I was like, and Dwayne was there too, his buddy. And I was like, dude, can I like record you guys? And so like, they were like, yeah, sure. We were like, we'll sign the waiver, whatever, the guest release, and you can, we trust you. So I was able to do in the field interviews with them for a solid 5 to 6 hours and make podcast episodes out of that. And just like, we had some wild stuff happen out there. Like Oregon, like you hear it's nuts, but then when you get there, you're like, this is absolutely insane. This is like, if you've ever seen the cartoon Gravity Falls, it is 100% the real Gravity Falls, dude. It's wild. I love it. I can't wait to get back there again.
Dude, I have not had the chance to go out west, but it's definitely one of those things on my bucket list. It's like, I definitely get out in the field. I definitely do my own research and stuff, but I'm from the Michigan area, so it's just like, I stay somewhat near Michigan, and it's like, we don't have nearly as mountainous of areas. Like, we got hills and stuff when you start getting south into like, Kentucky, Tennessee, all that stuff. But even if you go north into like the UP, there's a lot of sightings up there. But then the other issue you run into is the fact of like, there's one road that goes all the way around the outside, and all the sightings are like in the center. So it's a matter of like, trying to figure out how to get into these areas where these sightings are when there's no roads that go to these areas. So it's just a totally different thing to actually research Sasquatch over in this area versus out there. But honestly, man, it's like there's so much mountainous areas out there that if they're anywhere, they're definitely out there. I think that they're all over the United States, but more so out there than anywhere else because there's just so much different areas for them to roam that normal people just aren't typically getting into.
It's crazy. It's like I was out there for a week, and I would just talk to anyone in that town, which is a small 3,500 resident town in the middle of this huge forest. And literally anyone you would talk to has had a Bigfoot encounter. And these are just, blue collar loggers. And I was working my booth at the festival. I was out there for a festival, Sasquatch Summerfest, and just people are coming up, sharing with me all these stories. And these aren't like Bigfoot guys. These are just like loggers, construction workers, and they're like, yeah, I was out in the mountains and totally saw this Bigfoot through my scope, and then yeah, that dude, that was a crazy one. Can I share that real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man.
It's a weird one. So this guy comes up to my booth and he's like, so I was out hunting on the top of this mountain in a meadow outside of Oak Ridge, and he's looking through his scope and he sees a Sasquatch family at the end of the meadow. And so they look up at him and they see him looking through the scope. And he's like, oh snap. So they disappear, and he hears something running towards him on either side of the tree line of the meadow. And he freaks out, of course. He drops his backpack and his high-powered rifle, jets back to town in his truck. And when he gets back to the Oak Ridge area, he gets his buddies and he's like, guys, I left my super expensive rifle. You gotta let's posse up. Let's go back to this mountain. I gotta get my rifle back. When they get back there, the backpack is on the ground, ripped to shreds. The high-powered rifle is on the ground, and the scope, imagine if something like a huge hand took scrunched the scope and the glass blew out on either side. And then the part of the gun underneath that was just exploded out, and the rifle barrel was bent back, and there was blood on the rifle barrel and the other part of the gun as well. And so they think either the Sasquatch may have got mad at it and maybe hurt himself or shot himself by accident. They're not sure. Long story short, the guy actually gets his rifle back. Now it's bent to crud, but he puts it in a plastic bag, hides it in his house. And the next part, if I had gotten this in an email, I would be like, this is too crazy. But I was talking to the guy face to face, and that's where it's different. And he's like, I got this person who worked in the Smithsonian, and I talked to him about what I had in this bag. And the guy was like, oh yeah, you should totally send it to us and we'll do a test on it for you and let you know if it was a Bigfoot or something like that. Right. And so of course, the Smithsonian never got the gun in the mail, and it magically disappeared forever.
It's in that Indiana Jones room, with all the boxes where they push it down.
Probably. Exactly. So, and then at the end, I was like, I was like, thank you for sharing your story. I didn't get your name. And he was like, that's because I didn't give it to you. And then he just turned around and walked away, just disappeared. I was like, oh, snap. And it was like 2.5 days of all that. I had maps out on my table of the area. And like, I was like, yeah, mark down where you've seen a Bigfoot. And so I have just markings all over these maps of people that have never shared. And it was just crazy. And then I was able to follow up with these people, interview them for the podcast. So I have all these like podcast episodes of like people that have never talked from this area that's super remote in Oregon. It was just amazing. I loved it, Shayn. I can't wait to do it again. I'm going to do it in Oklahoma next year too. Same thing. So.
Dude, I was going to say, you got to do a documentary every single time you go out, release it as podcast episodes, and you even put it together as like short form, like documentary style or something like that. I mean, you got the connections and stuff. I'm sure somebody could help you with it.
Yeah. No, I know. It's wild country out there, dude.
We will be right back after this brief commercial break. But just a quick reminder, if you guys want to stay up to date on the show, you guys can always go and follow Inquiries of Our Reality and Open Minds Media on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, YouTube, and TikTok. Now, feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it.
There was I was able to interview a wilderness guide at his cabin, and he had some wild stories, dude. He was out in this area called Diamond Peak Wilderness with his wife, and they were out tent camping, and they woke up one morning, and their tent had been like just ripped to shreds while they were in it. And the crazy thing is that the outside of the tent and the top of the tent was just like covered in soaked in urine. And I was like, dude, how did you like sleep through something just tearing into your tent and then just soaking it? And he's like, oh, I don't know, but we got out of there super quick, dude.
I assumed it was rain or something. I don't know, man. Like,
no, dude. Because he looked into it, and it was urine. It was not, and he's a super outdoors dude. And I was like, had you ever seen anything like it? He was like, it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen, like cougar or anything, but it was definitely some kind of urine on that. So that guy had some wild stories. I'll try to say this a certain way. He used to be a gentleman who liked to dabble in horticulture out in the woods. And so him and his buddies were like way out there, and pretty much had a crazy Sasquatch encounter in midnight or 1 a.m. while they're trying to like get their plants. Something had been like ripping up the plants on top of the hill that they've been planting and like throwing it 10 feet up in a tree. And so they're trying to get out of there, and like this thing is like coming at them, dude. It's the wildest. It's the wildest.
Something smells like skunk. It's just throwing them up in the trees.
Yeah, what is this? What is this around here? So, dude, it's crazy, man. I could just keep going and going, but like the stories are just wild that I get through this podcast. It's absolutely wild, dude.
Dude, I want to hear some more of these stories. We can definitely dive into your stuff, but I want to hear some of your most like crazy stories. But I don't know if I actually shared this one on this show. And I know I shared it on Bizarre Encounters, but Small Town Monster Fest, you weren't vending, so you didn't have like the random people coming up to your table maybe. But did you have some random older guy tell you like a fishing story about Sasquatch when you were there?
At Monster Fest?
Yeah.
No, see, I didn't have a booth, so I wasn't getting stories from people like you were. I was just interviewing people that were there vending.
Dude, I had this guy that came up to me, and I go, hey, you listen to podcasts, doing like the generic, you're going to hand him your card and all that kind of stuff. He goes, no, I don't really listen to podcasts. He's like, I don't really believe in the whole like Sasquatch thing either. But he's like, hey, are you one of those people you can tell experiences to? I'm like, yeah, what's up? He goes, man, I had this one time, I was out fishing, and he's like, I ended up seeing this thing on the side of the water. It looked like a giant ape. It was like splashing around on the side of the water. So I started staring at it, and I made direct eye contact with this thing. And then next thing you know, he's like, I don't know what happened on the in-between, but I'm driving home, and I somehow had my boat on my trailer, and I loaded up my trailer. He's like, I don't remember doing any of that. I just remember making direct eye contact with this thing. And then next thing I know, I was on the road, and he's like, I don't believe in Sasquatch. I don't believe in any of this weird stuff, but he's like, I don't know. I came to this place figuring I might tell somebody about this encounter and see if somebody could tell me what happened. And I was like, man, I think you had missing time. I was like, do you get into like the whole extraterrestrial stuff? He's like, no. He goes, I don't even really believe in Sasquatch. He goes, I don't listen to podcasts. And he just like walked away after that. I'm just like,
Oh,
you just left a bomb on my lap and then walked away. Like, what?
That's magical. That's the type of guy that you need to like wrangle into getting on the show, and just like, it's hard to get those guys to talk on record though.
Dude, I gave him my card. I gave him all my information. I'm like, please, if you ever want to talk more about your experience, please get a hold of me. He's like, I don't go on the internet much. I'm like, here's my number. I wrote it down on the card. He's like, okay, thank you, or whatever. Like,
nice.
Like, that was pretty much like the end of it. You just kind of like ended the story, and I just tried to give him my info, and he walked away, and that was it.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's wild.
That's probably one of the best ones that I've gotten, just vending and stuff like that, just because of like the missing time and the fact that this whole time this guy was just trying to reiterate the fact of like, I don't believe in Sasquatch. So it's like one of those people that he knows something weird happened to him, but he still just like doesn't want to rationalize it in his head. So he's still looking for like the obvious answer when he clearly had some type of bizarre experience.
Oh, absolutely. Dude, I love those like out of nowhere old timer stories. They are the absolute best. Man, just crazy stuff. I also like the ones where I don't know if you've ever tried to. So I'll give you one of the things I do to try to get people to talk to is like I'll think of an area, like I'll think of, okay, Prince of Wales Island in Southeast Alaska, lots of Bigfoot encounters there, right? So you join the Facebook group, and then you find like the Prince of Wales Island Facebook group, and you post in there, hey, anyone got any Bigfoot stories? You'll get made fun of for about 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, people will start DMing you like, hey, I got this stuff. So like one of my favorite stories is this logger hit me up from Prince of Wales Island. And he was like, yeah, I was hunting, fishing in the southeast corner of the island in this wilderness area. And he goes to the edge of this stream and looks over, and there's like this creature that looks like an orangutan that's just like leaned over the side of into the creek and just like scooping fish out and kind of fishing with his hand. And he was like, dude, and this was not a Bigfoot guy. It was incredible. He's just a run of the mill blue collar logger. And he's like, dude, it looked like an orangutan in the middle of this island in Southeast Alaska, and I had no idea what was going on, and it was fishing, and it looked right at me. I was like, oh, that is the coolest thing. Dude, it's just, I love stories like that, where it's a guy that has nothing to lose or nothing to gain. He's not selling a book. He doesn't have a podcast. He's just a guy that's like, I'm confused, and yeah, I'll talk about it. Just wild stuff. Yeah. So,
dude, talking about people that don't believe in stuff, I'm actually going to get to go back to this area next weekend, actually. It's actually some family lives up there. It's like almost touching like the UP in Michigan. I don't want to give the exact area because I'm sure that as soon as I start talking about it, people will probably start looking into it and stuff. And I don't want too many people in that area yet. But so the first time I went up there, I was just kind of like asking around because it's a lot of like state land and stuff. I was like, hey, has anybody had any experience? Has anybody had any experiences? So my girlfriend's cousin's girlfriend's dad is like, well, I don't want to say it's a Sasquatch or anything, but he was like, there was one night that, we were hanging out and stuff like that, and we ended up coming home late, and it was the middle of winter, and we ended up taking one of the fire roads to come home, and we ended up getting the car stuck on one of the fire roads, and it was pitch black, middle of the night. We just decided to keep the heat on and basically just crash there for the night. So he's like, about 20 minutes into us laying there, because it was him and his brother, he said that this giant thing moved past the front of the vehicle, and it shook the vehicle. And he's like, we got elk out here, we got bear and stuff. He was like, it wasn't any of that. He's like, I've seen all these things because I've lived out here my whole life. It was something bigger than that. It was something big enough that it shook the car. And he was like, and it left some, like, just like a path in front, but it just looked like two lines, like something was just shuffling quick through the snow. So he's like, I couldn't necessarily make out what it was, but after having something shake the car, we pretty much tried to start the car up, dig it out, and just get out of there. So then there's one of those weird experiences. So then Dave, which is my girlfriend's cousin, his girlfriend, she kind of believes in Sasquatch a little bit, but she's kind of interested in it, but isn't like a full bred, like, oh, I believe in Sasquatch. Same with like Dave. He was kind of like, Sasquatch, it's interesting. If it's out here, maybe that'd be cool. Like, but I don't know. I don't put too much thought into it. So they went fishing about 6 months ago, and they went into the spot that they don't normally go to. Somebody locally mentioned that it was like a really good spot to fish and stuff. So they end up going in there, and they start hearing like whooping and stuff like that coming from like the woods around it. And they kept hearing like 2 whoops. They kept hearing whoop, 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 whoop. And I mentioned the fact of like how many of you were there, and they said there was 2 of us. And I've noticed, at least from talking to people, or it seems this way, that the number of whoops seems to be how many people seem to be in the area at the time. And then after that, they started hearing stuff getting thrown from like the woods off in the distance, and they ended up taking off out of there. So they were like, I don't know if I full well believe in Sasquatch, but that was a really weird experience because it was definitely some land that nobody was out in. And they're like, and it was some animals I've never heard before. And I started playing like different whoop sounds and stuff for him. And his girlfriend's like, yeah, that is 100% what I heard. So I told them when I go up there, you guys got to show me this area. Cause I tried to go squatching with, my girlfriend's cousin last time, and it was like one of those things where like you go out with somebody who doesn't fully believe, so you're kind of doing your thing, but you don't want to be too far out there and throw them off. But now this time I'll get to go out there and do it full well and check out this area, dude. So I'm super excited about it, and I always love those experiences where you have somebody that doesn't believe, and then they have this weird experience. You show them these sounds, and they're like, that's exactly what I heard. And they get like chills, and you can like see the expression in their face of getting chills as you show them these sounds. It's like one of the best, dude.
That's awesome. And that was in Michigan, you said?
Yep. It's like almost touching the upper peninsula. It's still in the lower peninsula of Michigan. It's like towards the tip of the fingers.
One of the most favorite interviews I've had this is way back, but was actually in Michigan, in the lower Michigan. I was in a town called Glenny. And there is this police officer, retired police officer that approached me, and he said, okay, I got to tell you about this thing that happened way back in the day. I was on vacation. My family owned a vacation cabin up in Glenny. And so I go there, and I'm going there by myself, just hanging out, trying to, decompress from being a police officer for a bit. So he goes out to use the porta potty or outhouse, I guess you would say, and he's maybe I would say about like 5 feet away from it, and a Sasquatch steps out from the side of the outhouse, and pretty much they have this standoff. And it's one of the most intense. He pretty much ends up drawing his gun on it, and it's just not a good thing. The Sasquatch freaks out, gets out of there. He ends up barricading himself inside the cabin and just has this like super intense. It's crazy. It's also a good lesson to learn because it had terrible audio quality because I was so young at a young podcaster, and it ended up being the one that everyone listened to, and it had like almost I don't know, like 500,000-600,000 listens, and everyone's like, the audio is terrible in this. It's like, yeah, keep getting me engagement, guys. But yeah, that's a fun one for Michigan. Michigan has a lot of weird stuff that happens. People don't give it enough credit, I think, but
yeah, we got like
some weird stuff there.
We talked about in your show a little bit. We got all like the Dogman stuff. There's a lot of Dogman sightings. It's just the problem with Michigan is the fact that most people associate Michigan with the Detroit area. The Detroit area is all city. It's all not like big skyriser city, but it's just like flat, wide, long city. So it's like when you come in from Ohio and you just see all of that, it's like, oh yeah, there's no Sasquatch here. But then once you start getting mid-state and up, that's when you start getting into the Squatch area. And it's like most people that go into Michigan, it's like they're staying in lower Michigan. They're not getting up to the point where you're seeing like the pretty thick Michigan. And it's like anytime I go squatching, man, I never am really in my area. Like I go to the other side of Michigan. I go to the like almost to the UP and stuff like that. And it's like there's some really, really squatchy areas. Like, I mean, the Dewey Lake Monster. I mean, that's like one of the infamous Sasquatch encounters through history, and that's completely on the other side of the state. And that's one of the spots that I usually go is near the Dewey Lake Monster. And I think we talked about it a little bit on your show last time too.
We did, yeah. That was a really interesting discussion, and definitely. I don't know. Have you ever talked about that on your own show before? I can't remember.
I think I may have talked about it on the last episode I had Brian on, which was maybe like 5 episodes before this. I think that was the first time I had brought it up, and that was like before I ended up talking to you. So I kind of basically went over it a little bit on the show, but I don't think I've talked about it on my other show yet.
Oh, it was a fun chat, and you definitely have some good opportunities there in the future. to document what's going on in that area. But I like the way that you are thinking of handling it, kind of get the one-on-one chat first and then eventually be able to record stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. And we are back. So let's hop right in. Kind of makes it so that people aren't just like, because you don't want people to get the wrong impression. Like you go for a squatch hike, of course you're going to have your GoPro and everything because you want to have stuff just in case. But it's like you don't want to just show up the first time and just have cameras and everything in everybody's face. Like you want to make people comfortable first. If it's somebody who's like a normal squatcher or something like that, it's one thing. But if it's somebody that's just like, I've had these experiences in my property or whatever, you don't want to be disrespectful. So it's like you go the first time, you get a feel, you get them comfortable with you, and then after that you ask permission, and then they're more than happy to do it. But I guess everybody kind of goes about it a different way. But I try not to be too evasive with it at first. And even on the other side, if people are having experiences and they want somebody to investigate it, you don't want to make it seem like you're just out there to, record and get views on everything. Like if you're trying to investigate it for me, you want to do them just the first time at least,
Yeah, I think, it's really I try to always focus on the individual first. The content is never number one, ever. It is whatever is best for the individual. So, man, there are some times where an episode will take a year to a year and a half just to happen. Just because I'm okay with waiting the amount of time for the individual to be comfortable enough. Maybe we have to chat in different ways over that year until they get to the point where they trust me enough. And I mean, that's what's important, is that the person is in an environment where they feel safe enough and comfortable enough to be able to share some of these people, most of the people I talk to, they end up using, they use a fake name, an alias, and it's wild. I can't disguise the voice. I don't have the way to do that. But it's just some of these witnesses. And rightfully so. I think in some cases they have to really think about, if I put this out there, how can this affect the rest of my life? Will people, recognize my voice in my community? Sometimes that does happen, but most of these people are at the point where they're like, you know what? I have nothing left to lose anymore, and I need to help get the truth out. And I think we're at the point in history where people are just don't care what other people are going to say anymore, and they are like, we got to get the truth out about whatever is going on with this whole Bigfoot thing. So,
man, not necessarily pertaining to Bigfoot, and I don't know if you've had this experience on your show before, but I've had a few people that I've recorded the episode and they got it all out on the table. And afterwards, they pretty much asked me to not release the episode, but they appreciate the fact that I sat and listened to them and let them put it all out on the table and stuff. And pretty much I had one of them that grew up in a cult family, and they started talking about all the inner workings of their family, everything that was going on. And they pretty much asked me at the end, they said, you can hold on to this. I might want to release this one day, but I just appreciate the opportunity that you let me sit down, put this all on the table, and actually gave me an open ear without just looking at me like I was completely crazy. So it's sometimes you'll end up recording an episode and it's the people still don't necessarily want it out, and you got to sit on it, but at least you were there and you were that opening, you open the door for them to actually have somebody to talk about this kind of stuff with.
Yeah, I have a 2.5 hour episode that haunts me because it's just it taught me a few lessons, but yeah, it was I can't really say much about it. It was a gentleman from Kentucky that had one of the most intense accounts I've ever heard in my life. But it taught me that before you talk to someone, you need to get a guest release. Because he was like, oh, I'll do it later. Never could get through to him. His phone was shut down. I try every 2 weeks, but it's just kind of you live and you learn, right? But sometimes though, it is needed just for people need to be able to talk. I've talked to people. I can think of one individual where I don't know if we could even ever let the story out because there would be repercussions that are pretty remember how you were sharing stories about like government involvement in near Manistee with like Dogman and stuff?
Yeah.
It's like that times 1,000. And it made me very nervous when I was talking to him. Maybe someday he will be able to share that, but I'm going to have to think long and hard before I put myself in the crosshairs like that. So
yeah, it's one of those ones that next thing you know, you'll get a knock on your door and then they'll be like, all right, all your equipment gets taken out of your house. Like no questions asked.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, Shayn. It's like the bigger that you become as a podcaster, you start to realize pretty quick that like people are listening to your show, and it can sometimes not be people that are like super into the subject for positive reasons. It could be people that maybe have negative things in mind. They're trying to track down people that have had encounters, and or track down Bigfoot and try to get a specimen or whatever. It just you really have to be careful what you put out there. So I've gotten to the point where unfortunately sometimes I'll take stuff out of the episode for the public and I'll leave a little bit in for the Patreon, but then sometimes there's stuff I just have to take out completely because I don't like people to get fired or messed up.
Ooh, yeah. Dude, I was going to say, even just podcasts in general, man, it's like when I first started my podcast, and I've noticed this with like a lot of podcasters when I asked them, if you look at your like analysis thing where it shows you like the pockets of listeners and stuff, it always seems like there's this pocket that's near Washington, D.C. So it's like, regardless of if they're actually listening and stuff like that, I mean, people don't think podcasters have that much speak or say, but it's like, with the way this society is nowadays, where everybody's worried about this disinformation, this, that, it's like, even if they're not necessarily listening to the podcast, I definitely feel like they're running these things through something that's picking up like keywords. And if there's keywords, then maybe they'll actually go back and like listen to it. But like you were mentioning on the other side of it, though, it's like, somebody has an experience where they've intertangled with some government intervention or something in the middle of it. They're running this thing through the scanner. Somebody brings up these specific words where it's like, a base that they brought up the name of, Sasquatch experience. And then they bring up something else. And it's like, it flagged these 3 words now. So then it's like, you never know what these things could be filtering through, that it's like, you may not think anybody that important is listening, but there might be special programs set up to flag keywords so that they do actually start investigating certain areas and stuff.
Yeah, it's really weird stuff. I've had like phone call interviews that if certain subjects related to Bigfoot that might be considered fringe are brought up, the phone call will magically disconnect, and then it's hard to get back in touch with the person. They're kind of semi-biblical topics to do with Bigfoot, if you get what I mean.
I've had a lot of that actually happen too. Yeah. When I get into like really heavy biblical stuff on the show, like even if I have full internet connection, I've noticed that it seems to be a common occurrence that things dip out, which is weird because it's like you'll go 10 shows never having an issue, and then you'll have one where you bring up this certain topic that you have issues with, and all of a sudden it's like one person will be kicked out of the room for 20 minutes. Like, it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but on the other hand, it's like, I can speak for myself. I do take this very seriously because, putting out so many episodes, like at this point, like I'm putting out a lot of content, and, hopefully it's around forever in a way. And I have this weird thought that, man, it's going to get to the point where I'm going to be like 70 years old, and like this like 20-year-old, whatever they call the kids in the future, they're going to track me down, and I'll just be hanging out, and they'll be like, dude, are you the guy who used to talk to people about Bigfoot? And like, what about this area? Can you tell me about it? And then maybe I'll get on this kid's show in like 50 years and get to tell the story about Oak Ridge, Oregon, or
you'll be the other side of the microphone.
Yeah, it'd be weird, but I could totally see it happen, because that's the thing, man. You put content out on the internet and it lives forever, and it keeps affecting people's lives, even though you continue to grow older. It's weird.
It's kind of a weird thing to think about too, that as far as like the community goes, there of course has to be the origin for everybody that kind of gets far into the community. And it's like, we have these like pillars of like the cryptid community and of the Sasquatch community that have been doing it since like the 70s, 80s. But it's like, it's funny to think that eventually it's like, we're going to become those pillars of the community once everything kind of transitions, and we're going to be like the guys that are like in our 70s, and we're going to be like the pillars of the community eventually one day. Like, it's so weird to just think about that transition happening.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right, because we're about to get into a really interesting situation over, I would say, the next 10 to 15 years, where you're going to start to see individuals in the community get just like really old, like, I mean, people like even Cliff and Bobo, they are not super young guys anymore. And like people like Ron Moorhead, who is amazing. Like he's getting up there too. And I mean, well, Bob Gimlin, like, we're lucky that we are still able to have him in the community, because I believe he's up to like 93 now. He's extremely up there. But
Ron Moorhead, when I had him on the show, he's like, man, I don't even really like traveling and doing presentations and stuff anymore. He said when I was young, it was a lot of fun, but he's like, I'm getting older now. It's harder. It's like, it's not fun to do anymore. He's like, I like going on podcasts because I can just sit in my front room and I can talk, but he's like, it's getting to the point now where it's like, again, these people are going to Sasquatch events to go and see. It's like they're getting to the point where they don't want to travel anymore because they've been doing it for so long. And again, it's like when you get to be a little bit older, it's like it loses its fun to it. It's like you just want to be able to relax at home and stuff like that. So I mean, even Ron Moorhead, man, I feel like he's gonna be one of those ones that, yes, he's gonna pop up on podcasts, but I feel like as the next couple of years keep rolling, you're gonna start seeing him at less and less events actually like speaking to the public.
Yeah, it's definitely if people are into Bigfoot and they're listening to this, I would say one of the coolest things you can do is actually take the time to go to an in-person Bigfoot festival or conference, and the connections you'll meet at that thing will just change your life in ways that you could never imagine. It's the coolest thing. So, don't have all your connections just be on the internet, but take the time to go to places like, anything from Sasquatch Summerfest in Oak Ridge, Oregon, to there was Monster Fest, and there's a lot of different cryptid festivals you can go to, and it's worth it to check them out, even if you have to drive a few hours to get there.
Honestly, man, it's like just the community as a whole, and it like makes it worth it, because it's like, everybody has their ups and downs where it's like they're like, why do I even do the things that I do? But it's like regardless of that, it's like I would never be able to stop podcasting just because the community and all the people are so great that it's like I would feel like I'm like losing part of myself now if I stopped doing my show, because then I wouldn't have like that means of being like, hey, I want to have you come on my show, because it's like you can have these random conversations and stuff, but it's just people are less prone to have them with you if it's not like for the sake of doing a show or something, because it's not like you can just hit up Ron Moorhead or hit up, Lyle Blackbird or something just to have like a 2-hour conversation, just because it's like you got to use the show as like a means to be able to have the conversation,
That's a really interesting internal conversation I've had myself. Podcasting is kind of a really cool cheat code, because if you have a subject or a niche that you are really into, if you set up a podcast and you just put some years into it and you just start talking to people, eventually you will get amazing access to people that were probably your heroes. And especially in Bigfooting, I think Bobo is the person who said this, is like Bigfooting is the one field where your heroes can become your friends, which is very, really cool. Also, sometimes be careful to meet your heroes, but just do it. Just meet your heroes, But
if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But on the other side, if they're great, then they're great.
99% of the people I've met have been solid. I mean, it's a great community. So
say there's just a little random like infighting between like certain people. For the most part, everybody means well. Like it's just, the whole debate between like the, like spiritual Sasquatch, quantum Sasquatch, paranormal Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, and then like the flesh and bone Sasquatch. But it feels like that argument is slowly becoming a little less confrontational than it has been in the past. Now the huge argument in the community is people with fake images. Like that seems to be like the main laser focus that everybody gets mad about. It's less of the community arguing with each other and more of just people getting pissed off at fake images.
I would say you're absolutely right. And I think that the whole like people being weirded out by we'll say the woo side, because that's how it's referenced. A lot of that is because the individuals with, I would say, the Flash of Beauty documentary have done such a good job with bringing that to light in a way that is professionally done, that it's made a lot of people just really think about things and be like, oh, well, maybe there is something to this, that there's something out of the ordinary happening, or something that science can't explain. And wow, there's more than 10 people having there's hundreds of people having weird stuff happen. But I would say, yeah, a huge thing. And I stay out of stuff like this, just because it's not why I'm in the community. But I would agree with you that, yes, the big thing right now is the whole fake videos, fake graphics, AI stuff. There's a lot of really interesting discussions going on, and you don't have to look far to figure out what I'm talking about. So
that, and then the new one I keep seeing is people would take like screenshots from old movies, and then they'll throw it in there. Like there was one that was maybe like a year ago where it looked like the back of like a Sasquatch, and it looked like it was like a trail cam photo, and it ended up being from some like obscure French movie from like the 80s or something like that.
Yep. That's the one I was thinking about too just now. It's a really interesting French documentary about like prehistoric man, or like ape people, and I mean the way that it's filmed, it's very well filmed. So when you see stills that are taken out of context, it really made you think for a few minutes, like, oh man, what is this all about? But then it was there's a lot of really smart people in the community, and they figured it out relatively quick. So
it was like I saw that image, I went back online a couple hours later, and I already saw it completely. Like, here's the rest of the scene this was from, and I was just like, oh, this might be something solid. But I already had that doubt in the back of my mind, because it's like you never really find good solid Sasquatch trail cam footage. It's like maybe you'll get a blur, you'll get like something that looks weird, like maybe part of a finger going in the camera, but it's like there's never just like, here's a Sasquatch on a trail cam. Like, there's a reason for it. Like, I think it's just the trail cam itself. Like, they can smell it, they can hear it. Like, there's something to it. But anytime I hear a trail cam footage with Sasquatch, like, there's already this like unintentional doubt in the back of my head, just because I know of all the weird technical aspects to actually catching that. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this commercial break, if anybody is interested in supporting the show or any of the work I do over here, you guys can go and check out the OMM Patreon. Over there is 7-day free trials available for all of the tiers, and it is constantly updating with new shows and different stuff going on. You guys can also go and check out the OMM merch store, constantly getting updated with new designs, not just pertaining to the podcast themselves, but also cryptid, paranormal, and extraterrestrial related designs. And the third way you guys can support the show, if you guys think I deserve it, is that you guys can leave a 5-star review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. And if you guys leave a 5-star review, of course, I will read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. Now let's get to the commercial break so we can hop back in the show. And we are back. So let's hop right in.
Yeah, I think it's from what I've heard and talked to people, it's has to do with like the IR that comes out from the trail cam. They think, and it's actually been proven that a lot of animals are affected by that.
I was hearing something like cougars can see the light or something. Yeah, like it's almost like a red beam that comes out of the front of the camera, so we can't see it, but other animals just see this giant red light. They're just like,
exactly,
avoid that.
Exactly. So, yeah, it is some really interesting discussions going on, but man, I think personally that 2025 is going to have some wild evidence come out. I just have a feeling dude, I don't know if you hear stuff. I hear a lot of stuff because I'm the Bigfoot guy. Like the Olympic Project, you've heard of them before out in the Olympic Peninsula. So imagine this. There are a solid at least two other Olympic Project style things going on right now that are completely secretive. And people have no idea because these people are just keeping their mouths shut. And they are in an area. Oh my goodness. Eventually I'm going to have these guys on my show, but they're not at the point where they're like, they have to figure their stuff out before they come out in the open. with it. But yeah, I really hope next year is the year where there's some crazy evidence thrown out there. I don't know. We'll see. But
it's either that or it's going to be more extraterrestrial stuff, because it seems like we had this like down spot, and it's bound to pop back up at some point again.
Dude, like the thing right now I saw everyone is freaking out is those portal art installations that have been put up. I think ones might be in Michigan. Maybe I don't know. Maybe
there might be one in like Lansing or one of the college towns, because there's a couple of college towns in Michigan. Just I know there's not one in Detroit. There's like this weird like art piece that's not like the portals where you can see, but it's just this like Stargate looking thing down in Detroit. But if you're talking about the screen portal ones, they might have some of those in one of the college towns in Michigan.
No, not the screen one. I know what you're talking about, but this one is just like, it's a really interesting art installation. You can go down some weird rabbit trails, and I'm sure you've already done that, but you know, sometimes the TikTok FYP feed gets a little weird on my side. So
same here, trust me.
Look into stuff like portals and whatever. Give Bigfoot a break for a little bit, but
Detroit's very occult, so I follow a lot of like Detroit pages. So there's like constantly people that are going around the city and they notice like these weird like symbols and stuff like that are in the sidewalk, or again these like, you know, monuments and structures that are like, oh, this is supposed to represent the spirit of Detroit, but then it has this piece where it looks like a bunch of souls are like trapped inside of this box, and it's in this giant circular pattern. So it's like, dude, like Crowley literally came to Michigan and he started the Masonic Temple, which is this big thing that everybody has concerts and everything like that at. So it's like, it's one of those things that Detroit is very occult, but it's only a cult if you notice that it's a cult. But as soon as you notice that it's a cult, you just see it everywhere, and there's like no denying it. Like there's something weird to Detroit as far as like occult symbolism, magic, something like that goes. Like Detroit's gonna have some weird paranormal stuff at some point in the future. Like I can guarantee you that.
Yikes. I'll have to be careful when I go to Detroit next.
Be careful of that, and also be careful with the crackheads, because most people think that like, oh, Detroit, like you're gonna get shot by somebody. Like, no, it's the crackheads you got to worry about. It's not anybody else.
Well, I remember back in the 90s, like we would visit I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Detroit, and we were there around, I think it was October, and this is like mid 90s, and they were like, okay, you guys got to go like right now. And we're like, oh, this is weird. Like, seriously? And my parents were like, are you sure? They're like, yep, it is. I guess there was a time of year called Hell Night.
Oh, yes. Like, it's Devil's Night, the night before burns. Halloween.
Like, you need to leave Detroit.
Yep.
Before then, or it's going to get crazy. So yeah, we had to skedaddle out of Detroit because of that. So that was a weird thing to experience as a little kid.
Just to give people a frame of reference, have you ever seen the movie The Crow? Like the good one, not this new remake?
No.
the old one with Brendan Lee where he like died on set and stuff. So the whole premise how that movie starts is that like, you know, his girlfriend and everything gets killed, but it's supposed to be Devil's Night in Detroit. And that's like the premise of that movie and how it starts and everything. But yeah, I thought that was one of those things growing up that it was just everybody knew about Devil's Night. I didn't realize until like a couple of years ago that that's like a Detroit thing. And it started because, again, the night before Halloween, everybody would like torch the city and just burn down like half the damn city. And then they started trying to like rephrase it, where I remember when I was a kid, they had all these like news articles that came out. They're like, we're calling it All Saints Night. We're calling it this. We're calling it this night. They're trying to change the name. And again, still the same thing would happen. People would burn down abandoned houses. Like Devil's Night's just light half the city. Detroit on fire. Like,
oh my goodness, that's wild. Yikes.
I don't feel like it gets as crazy as it used to now, but now it's mainly like, the fires will happen in these like old neighborhoods and stuff like that. So it's not like nearly as publicized, but I think that's also purposeful, because when people know that they can light a building on fire in Detroit and then it's all over the news, people can sit back at home and go, I started that. But now it's like, if they don't advertise it on the news that it's happening, then it's like people aren't getting the recognition. So people aren't as interested in doing it. But I feel like it's mainly now like the neighborhoods, rather like the old abandoned neighborhoods, than like the actual like city itself, like it used to be. Like, back in the 80s, 90s, like, yeah, it was bad. Like, they would burn down, like, businesses, all that stuff.
Oh, man, that's wild.
But totally went on a side tangent from there. I guess we could bring it back around to Sasquatch, because we were going to dive into your experiences, and we somehow totally sidetracked on that. But I don't know if I should ask this before or after, but I don't know if I asked you on your show either. I don't know which side of, like, Sasquatch you kind of sit on, or if you're kind of sitting in the middle and take everything in, but I guess whether you want to kind of state that before or after your experiences, I feel like those kind of tie into why you believe what you believe.
Yeah. I mean, that we can, it's a pretty straightforward one. So on the podcast, I talk to people from all different sides. Like I'll talk to someone that is like way into quantum stuff like Ron Moorhead, or I'll talk to someone who's like camo hunter guy in southeast Oklahoma who, you know, thinks he's going after wood ape and it's all flesh and blood, right? Does not matter to me. Now, personally, what I think is that we are looking at some kind of flesh and blood creature that can do a lot of weird stuff that science has no idea. There's a lot of animals that have been discovered over the years that can do a lot of weird stuff. There's, for example, things like the echidna that have electrical sensors in their face. There's things like the octopus that have built-in camouflage, so they kind of go in front of a rock face and they immediately turn into the same pattern and colors of those rocks. So I don't think it's too far out of the too much to ask to think that we could have some weird creature out there that can do some maybe camouflaging stuff, maybe all sorts of weird stuff. Now that's just my personal opinion, but that's currently what I'm holding. Now, if I'm out there in the woods and something crazy goes down and I see like Bigfoot step out of a portal like Terminator, then probably things are going to change my mind, right? But for right now, we're going to stick with that. So
I'm glad that you brought that up because you're exactly in the same spot that I am with this. And honestly, I've never heard anybody throw it back the same way that I usually kind of describe it, is that, again, I think a lot of these abilities are stuff that is natural. It's just only seen in one place in nature, like a lot of examples that I give too, like that you just did. But it's just a matter of like, we look at it as supernatural because we don't understand it yet. And just props to you for coming to the same conclusion that I did, because I haven't heard anybody actually throw that one back at me. So
it's wild how a lot more people than you think are holding to that position, just because it has been like, I'll ask most people I talk to on my show that question, and a lot of people will bring that up where that's the way that they're feeling. So it's very interesting. But
the Nephilim one seems to come up more than anything when I ask people, I feel like, but maybe it's just the type of people I have on the show, but it seems like most people get behind the Nephilim hypothesis as far as people I talk to.
There's a lot of that. I do have talked to a few people that are into the whole Nephilim thing. Biggest regret is I never got to talk to Scott Carpenter. It was just a big thing I overlooked to have him on the show before. I mean, he's not with us, unfortunately, anymore, but his research he did down in Tennessee is absolutely incredible and wild stuff. I don't know if you've ever looked into it, but the things that he was capturing when he would be in the woods of Tennessee, everything from Sasquatch to Dogman to just weird looking alien things, and the dude had some weird stuff going on. Personally, what I have, so I have a good friend, Tate Hieronymus, who's a Bigfoot researcher. He goes all over the U.S. He's got a documentary series called Sasquatch: A Search for Sabe on YouTube. So I've actually been in a few of the Iowa episodes, so you can see that if you want to see me out doing stuff. So a year and a half, 2 years ago, he's very persuasive, and he'd be like, dude, we got to get you out in the field so you can start to experience stuff and you can talk better to these witnesses that you're talking to, which is actually a really good idea. So eventually I was at the point, I was like, all right, man, I'll go out with you. We'll go out for a weekend to a place that he knows in Iowa. Not hard to get to. Why not, right? What's the craziest that could happen? So he takes me out to this area. It's super hot. It's like 110 degrees heat index. We are just sweating to death. That's the first day. Not much happens. I believe it was the second day. There was a 30-degree temperature dip, and weird stuff started to happen. For example, like we were sitting in camp. All of a sudden, we had a tree. What sounded to us like a tree get pushed over right outside our camp. Tate starts doing some wood knocks after that. We get wood knocks in response around the entire camp. I had a audio recorder that was placed out on a picnic table about 30 feet away from my tent. I captured wood knocks at like 3 a.m. in the morning, and also the sound of a tent zipper being unzipped, which I'm the only one that had a tent, but I don't remember anything unzipping my tent. So we think that might have actually been a mimic noise. We have another researcher friend, Ontario Richardson, who has actually heard that zipper noise be mimicked in an area out in the woods where there are no zippers. So not out of the question.
I've even heard of car door ones too. So I mean, just to kind of throw that one in there, I've had a few people that it's like middle of the woods, nobody around, no cars, and they've said they've heard car door noises.
That is a very popular one out in Oregon and Washington State. They hear that a lot. Car doors, just weird stuff. The next year, I went out again to the same area with Tate, and a gentleman named Ron Man Reed in Ontario was there as well. We had some. The weirdest thing that happened that time was I was in my tent, and 3 a.m. in the morning, I heard what sounded like two whoops out in the woods outside my tent. Ron was in a different part of the campground area, and he heard what sounded like an Ohio howl, which is, that long, drawn-out call you hear on a lot of the TV shows.
It's like the siren for anybody that's listens to Sasquatch shows and stuff. It sounds like an ambulance siren going up and down a little bit. And in the recording, there's all the dogs barking in the background. I'm sure everybody who's listening to the show's probably heard it at some point.
A lot of people even, they'll say it kind of sounds like an old air raid siren as well. Yep. Sometimes they'll say that. So that was August of last year. Now, this year, my kid, who's, we'll say around 8 to 9 years old, he wanted to go on a Bigfoot adventure. So I was like, all right. So I took him out to the area, same area. And this is before I went out to Oregon, I believe. So we went out to this area. A lot of weird stuff happened. I was in this bathroom area, bathhouse over to the side, and I was doing my thing in there, and I was like, man, if this kid says, my kid is outside, and I was like, man, if he says, oh, that's weird, and like freaks out about something, then I'm going to like kick down the door because it's going to be like missing 411 time, right? And so like 10 seconds after that, I hear him say that exact same thing outside. I was like, holy mackerel, it's go time. So I like get outside real quick, and he's like pointing across into the woods. And I'm like, dude, what's up? And he's like, I just saw something peeking around the tree. I was like, oh, really? So we go over there, we check it out. Couldn't find any evidence or anything. He did at a later time that day. He was like, well, maybe I thought I saw it, and I like, freaked myself out or something. And I asked him at a later time, I was like, well, why would you think that? And he was like, well, it's because you don't see weird stuff like that usually in the daytime. And I was like, well, I mean, you kind of do. But we left it there.
Inquiries of All Reality would be back after this brief commercial break. But just a quick reminder, don't forget to go and check out the awesome sponsors of the show: IKNOWSQUATCH, Cryptoteeology, Snarly Yow Natural Products, Oregon-ite, Dimension Devices, and Big Ape Threads. More information and discounts for those are all available down in the show description. Now feel free to fast forward through these commercials so we can hop right back into the show. And we are back, so let's get back to it.
Another weird thing that happened is we were around the campfire, and it's around dusk, and I was walking around the campsite, and all of a sudden, like, my heart started racing a lot, and I don't have like weird stuff like that happen, to the point where I was like, oh, like what's going on here? There's no hospitals around here, so I better sit down because it's really racing a lot right now. Sat down, chilled out. My kid is running around the campsite. It's dusk. I'm like, dude, I settle down a little bit. So I get up to go over and talk to him. Heart starts racing again. I'm like, okay, what is going on here? The weird thing is I had an interview with a lady named Amy Boo, who had the same exact thing happen in Pennsylvania. Totally different part of the country, but they had heart racing. Multiple ladies in the group had their hearts affected by Sasquatch in the area. So also I had a really weird attitude come up out of nowhere. Usually I don't have weird attitudes, but it was like, this sucks, I'm out of here. And like the next morning, we left right at daybreak. And once we got like 10 miles away from the area, like totally attitude changed. And I was like, oh, this is really weird. I've never lived through anything where I've been physically affected like that. Then I actually, so we had talked when you were on my show, it might have been off camera, that I was going camping to the same area. So this last weekend, I went camping in the same area by myself, which a lot of people are going to say, maybe not the smartest idea, but I wanted to experience what it's like when you're out there by yourself so I could talk to witnesses better, right? So a few weird things that happened out there. The campsite I usually stay in, there was a huge family that was staying in it. They were nice people, but I couldn't stay in the same campsite, so I had to tent camp over by the tree line. And they had some kids over there, and the kids were like having a great time, right? They were running around, and they started picking up these sticks and just like whamming them on trees, similar to what a Bigfooter would do. And it was weird because they were like whamming on the trees, and the second that they stopped, a tree fell over right behind my campsite. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're calling in Bigfoot, maybe. Who knows?
Or making them mad. They're pushing trees over. Mad,
right? So I'm in the corner of the campground by myself, right on the tree line. The first night, there was a weird thing that happened at about 2 to 3 a.m. There was something that ran, from what I remember, something ran through the campsite that I had, and it was screaming. It didn't sound like it was a large animal or thing. So it may have been a fox. We're not sure. Now, the next day, that family left, and then it was just me in the forest, this huge area. I was the only one in there. That's when stuff started to get a little weird. It became pretty evident that I was the only one in there, and it got super quiet. That second night, because I was in there for 2 nights, and the second night was what freaked me out. I was trying to go to sleep. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. Something with bipedal steps was walking around my campsite, around the fire. And I was just like, oh my goodness. This is why people freak out, because I guess it might be a hunter, but why would a hunter be out there at 3 a.m. in the morning?
Also, I feel like a hunter knows better than to directly walk through somebody's campsite. Because again, that's how you get a gun pulled on you.
That's how you're going to get taken out. Exactly. So that was weird. That freaked me out. I've never experienced just like your breath becoming really heavy, like your heart freaking. And I was like, okay, I get why people freak out in this situation, because I'm having to talk myself down. Now, thankfully, I didn't have anything burst into my tent and try to take me out, and eventually whatever it was just left. Now, the weirdest thing though that happened, this is so weird. It was Sunday morning. I was like, okay, I made it through. That was a weird night, but I made it through. I'm sitting up in my tent. Sun had just come up. It's 7 a.m. Just thinking to myself, all of a sudden I hear in the woods outside the tent, I hear whoop, whoop. And it was to the point where I was like, wait, what? Like, well, that sounded exactly like the gibbon, like the gibbons at the Blank Park Zoo in Des Moines. I was like, what is going on here? It really freaked me out a little bit, to the point I was looking at my bird app, and I was like, there's no birds around here that make whoop noises. And I was like, well, dude, you already heard this last August. Like, why is this a big deal? Like, they're here. You heard it again, right? I even called up one of the individuals that work in that area, and I was like, hey, do you have anything that sounds like a gibbon out here in these woods? And they're like, well, maybe a heron. And I was like, no, but thanks.
It's always a heron.
A heron's not going to do anything. So that's the stuff I've had done in Iowa. Now, real quick, I can tell you about the stuff that happened in Oregon when I was out there. We had some really weird stuff happen in Oregon. So keep in mind, this is about 20, 25 miles out in the woods on a service road at the meadow that Ronnie told you about on your show, I would assume. A documentary film crew had been there the day before. they had a visual of one jumping out of a tree at the edge of that meadow. And I actually found a track in that area of the meadow where it jumped down. So that was really incredible. It had toes and everything. But one of the guys had put an apple, an orange, and a banana up in a pine tree over where Ronnie's gifting tree used to be. So we went there the next day. I was up there with Dwayne, Ronnie, and myself. And the apple and the orange had been taken out of the tree. The really weird thing is that something had taken the banana out of the tree and had peeled and eaten it and left it on the ground. And like that really messed with my head. I was like, oh my goodness, there's something out here that can peel stuff.
Because even if like a raccoon or something like that, it would have just thrashed it. It wouldn't have split it and opened it.
And in this area that this happened in, no one's going to just like randomly like get there. You have to, there's so many twists and turns, and it's 25 miles. It's so far out there. Now, the other weird thing that happened that really made me think a lot is we're out there. Ronnie probably told you about how he likes to play guitar for him, right?
Yep, of course.
Okay. Dude, when you experience that in person, it'll change your life. It is so amazing. So what would happen is he would sit in his chair and he would play this like old Beatles style song, but he makes up all these songs by himself. He actually hears them in dreams, and then he'll like wake up and start playing. It's incredible. We talked about that for a while too. Anyways, so he would play this song that sounds like the Beatles, but it's not. And a minute into it, me and Dwayne we're standing next to each other looking at Ronnie. A minute into his song, we hear something roar at us from the woods that is just like, it freaks us out, and it's crazy. And like all the blood rushed from my head, and like my ears turned off, probably because all the blood rushed from my head. And like, I was like, oh my goodness, this is nuts. And Dwayne was like freaking out because, Dwayne pretty much has like PTSD from what happened a few years ago. And he's like, dude, it's happening again. So we're kind of like, man, people get rushed out. They get chased out of this area by Bigfoot. It's crazy. But we're like, well, maybe we do one more song. We'll see what happens, and we'll go help get the festival set up. So Ronnie's like, all right, we will, he'll play another song. So he played another song, and a minute into that, something else from the woods did a roar and then a scream. And it was like the most horrifying thing I've ever heard. It really, for a while, it messed with me. And the other weird thing that happened in that area, did he tell you about how Denise, Dwayne's daughter, would talk to the Sasquatch through bird noises?
I don't think he brought that up, no.
Okay. It's really weird. And I honestly didn't believe it until I saw it happen in person. There's a bird noise you'll hear up there, but then you will hear half of it, and it's a blatantly fake bird noise, a mimic sound that you'll hear from the tree line on the edge of the meadow, just at the point where you can't see anything. And so we start to hear this mimic noise, and then Denise gets up out of her chair and starts making the bird noise back, the mimic noise back to the Sasquatch. And like they start going back and forth, way quicker, dude, than any actual bird could do. It was just, I wish I had gotten on camera. I didn't get it on camera. No one did. But it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then eventually the bird noise started to go further away from the meadow, almost like it was trying to get us to follow it, maybe. I don't know. But dude, that whole Oregon adventure, that pushed me way, way over into, like, I was 99%, but then that pushed me into like 150%. Like, there's no going back now. Like, you just experienced some weird stuff, and there's no other explanation for it at all. So Oregon was a weird place, dude.
Dude, I got a few areas that I got to go out to too. And one of them seems to be one of these areas, kind of like what you're talking about. And it's actually the guy that I brought up on your show who had that weird interaction and stuff like that I ended up having to get the name pulled out and everything. But
oh yeah, no, I got that. Don't worry, it's out.
I feel like there's this commonality that a lot of these people will bring up. These people that actually have these communications with them, where it's like they basically tell you like you can't be afraid. You have to just like hold your ground with these things. And it seems that way. I swear that Ronald Roseman told me something along those lines, and the other guy that I was mentioning told me something along those lines, that they'll start like acting like they're tough, and they basically say just to hold your ground and keep what you're doing. And then after that, they'll start trying to actually like communicate with you. But I don't know if you've kind of heard it from like different people you've talked to, but it seems like when they first start coming and interacting, they just seem extremely aggressive. Even like you were saying that he was like whooping and screaming out in the woods while he was playing guitar. But it's like, it seems like you have to almost like get past the hard exterior before they have a curiosity of you. Like they try to scare you away, and if you won't scare away, then they're like, okay, well, maybe we'll see what's going on with these people.
Yeah, that actually came up in that situation where a few people, including myself, were probably getting more excited than they should. And Ronnie would be like, dude, guys, you just got to chill out. You just got to act normal and just let whatever happens. That's pretty much what he said, more or less. And it's like, yeah, if you freak out, this stuff's not going to happen the way that it should, or it might get him too excited in a way where it could become a negative experience, so.
Dude, like I've even heard it to the point too where I think it was Ron that was talking about it, where he said that he's even had some weird experiences where even like with his playing guitar and stuff like that, he was kind of like resilient about going out and doing it for a while. And then he ended up getting back into it because near the end of the last time I was talking to him, it was when he was saying, all right, I'm starting to get back out there and I'm starting to go play guitar for him again and see what they do. And I'm glad that he got fully back out there clearly, because your experience talking to him, going and seeing with him, I think was after I talked to him. So he's obviously fully back out there and doing it, but
yeah, he is in it now. He's back in it. So hopefully he's at the point where he thinks that his relationship is restored with them. I'm sure it got brought up where there's a very like emotional connection that he has with them through playing guitar and making sure that there's a positive interaction and all that good stuff. And I think he's at the point where he's going to be going back more out there into the woods and trying to interact with them again. So we'll see what happens.
Dude, I mean, regardless of what you believe as far as these things, where they come from, like if they're flesh and blood, if they're woo-woo, whatever, it seems to be that there's this thing about them that you have to like almost kind of go about them how you would deal with any other animal, I guess you could say, where it's like, you have a bear, you have a cougar in front of you. The way to get out of that situation isn't by tailing it right back and running, because then it just stimulates their instinct to want to chase. You have to show that like you're going to hold your ground, you're going to stand your ground. So it seems to be the same interaction with these things. And I mean, I guess that is somewhat of like a human aspect too, because it's like a human has a lot more respect for another human that's able to stand their ground. So whether you're looking at it from like a more animalistic way or a more human way, I think that like standing your ground with these things brings respect from their side to your side.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put that. Definitely.
Hold tight, guys. This is the last break, so stay tuned. And we are back, so let's hop right in.
But I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, and I definitely want to have you come back on, man, because we said we're going to kind of get into some Sasquatch theories and stuff, and honestly, this was like a good introduction, but now we can get into like the nitty-gritty of all the Sasquatch discussion and stuff next time if you want. But I always like ending the show with words of wisdom, so if there was any words of wisdom you could bestow on the listeners today, what might it be?
I would say, if you're a podcaster, talk to people you want to talk to about things you want to talk about, and don't get into the game of, oh, I should interview this person because it'll get downloads. No, just do what you want to do and have fun. Also, if you're into Bigfoot, don't take it too seriously. Have a good time, but also be safe out there. If you're going to go out, remember, at the end of the day, you're pretty much going camping, so make sure you're prepared with first aid stuff, and that people know where you're going, and give your location to the people that love you, just in case. So
I definitely agree with both those statements, because when it comes to like a podcast, man, like do the things that you want to do with it. Some stuff may make people mad, some stuff people may love, but at the end of the day, you're true to yourself and you do what you enjoy, and that's all that really matters. And even with the Sasquatch thing you brought up too, man, same thing. It's like, at the end of the day, if you go out there and you don't have any experience, just enjoy camping. But always be prepared for that. And I'm one of those people, no matter what I do, and I'm about to go out somewhere, I'll like pin drop and let everybody know where I'm at just for the safety's sake and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no matter how much of a badass you may think you are, always take the extra precautions, because even badasses got to have a backup plan.
There you go.
But if anybody wanted to come and find you on the internet, they wanted to come and check out your show, they wanted to possibly report some encounters to you, any of the above, where can people find your show, and where can people find and contact you on the internet, man?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So you can, all the links you can find over at BigfootSocietyPodcast.com. We're on all the major podcast platforms. If you would like to reach out, I would love that. If you'd reach out with your Bigfoot encounter, if you'd like to share that with someone who will listen and not judge and have a safe environment for you to talk, you can reach out to BigfootSociety@gmail.com. You can also do any of the social media platforms, but if you want a place where it won't get lost, BigfootSociety@gmail.com is your best bet. So
perfect. And then this is something new that I'm going to start adding at the end of the show. I feel like it actually fits pretty well with a lot of the guests I have on. But do you have any work that's coming out soon? Any events that you're going to be at, or anything else that you'd like to promote or let people know is on the horizon?
Oh yeah, that's a solid question. Well, I will be at my last event for the year will be at Van Meter, Iowa, at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. That's September 28th. Next year, I hope to be back at Oak Ridge, Oregon for Sasquatch Summerfest. And hopefully in October 2025, I may be in Honobbe, Oklahoma, cross your fingers, for a festival down there. So to keep up to date with that, just follow the social media accounts for Bigfoot Society, and I will let you know.
Perfect, man. Well, I appreciate you making the time to come on today. Glad we finally got to have this conversation on both sides. And we'll definitely have to plan some more stuff for the future, because I think that there's a lot more conversation to be had, man.
Absolutely, Shane. Thank you so much for having me on.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of me through social media, Instagram or Facebook, but of course, Instagram is the one that I'm most active on. Or you guys can get a hold of me through the submission forums, which are available on the link tree. One of them is to contact me directly, which will go to my inquiries email, and the other one is to report an encounter. So if you guys have an encounter to report, don't forget to do that while you're there already. And every single thing that I've mentioned throughout the entire show is all available in the show description, and all of my links, of course, are available off the link tree, available down in the show description. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.